Hej allihopa och varmt välkomna hit till det här seminariet idag tillsammans med våra medlemmar i The Swedish E-commerce Association, GDPR Hero. Jättekul att ni har tagit er hit och varmt välkomna. Ni ska alldeles strax få presentera er själva också. Som sagt var, Swedish E-commerce Association, vi finns ju till för småföretagare för att man ska bli bättre på att utnyttja de digitala möjligheterna, bli bättre på att marknadsföra sig och i slutändan sälja mer. Det är ju lite grann där det allt handlar om för oss som småföretagare. Och jag vet att det här med GDPR är någonting som dyker upp med jämna mellanrum. Ofta som något ganska negativt, om jag får vara så rak och uttrycka det på det sättet. Och inte minst att det är många som ser det som ett hinder. Men det behöver det ju inte alls vara, som vi har lärt oss av er under den här tiden som vi har fått lära känna er och det som ni jobbar tillsammans med. Det här idag kommer att vara ett samtal mellan Edward och er. Och vi kommer också plocka upp lite frågor här som har dykt upp inför det här webbinariet. Chatten finns här. Använd den, ställ frågor och jag skulle säga verkligen utnyttja det här tillfället när vi nu har 2 stycken experter med oss på det här området. Så med det sagt lämnar jag över till dig, Edward.
Thanks, Kajsa. The session today obviously is going to be about GDPR and sales and marketing. I'm really happy to have Daniel and Julianne with us today because they are not just experts in the field, but they talk about it in a way that is understandable and in a way that's a bit more human. I know they're lawyers, but still they are human and they show it, and that's quite nice in this environment. And they're also small business owners themselves, so they get it, that we can't have the corporate approach to this. So it's great, and thank you for doing this session with us today. I can't believe it. I suppose it was just like yourselves when we talked about this. We did one like this for alumni, and it's over 2 years ago. It was April 2 years ago, and it feels like it was a few months ago. So it's well worth having the update as to what's happening within GDPR today. So I leave it to Daniel and Julianne. This will be a conversation based with questions in a structured way. And if you've any, we'll take them as we go. Otherwise, we'll take these as a structured way. But now I'll just hand over to Daniel and Julianne to just introduce themselves as to who they are and a little bit about themselves.
Great. Thank you so much, Edward. It's lovely to have this session now today where we can finally get all the questions up here in the air and take them down and maybe structure out a way for companies to work forwardly with GDPR. My name is Julianne Alestein and I work as a data protection lawyer here at GDPR Hero. I'm also quite involved with our GDPR platform, where we try to find digital solutions for companies, especially small and medium-sized companies, to work with GDPR in a structured and easy way. Mac, our compliance officer or feel-good officer, couldn't join us, unfortunately.
Oh, where is he?
He couldn't join us today, unfortunately.
Yes, it's mandatory nap at this time of day. So.
Okay.
It's a hard work. Keeping up with everything. But yeah, I'm joined with my colleague.
Yeah, hi everyone. Yeah, so I'm Daniel. I'm also a privacy lawyer. And we're having much more fun than it might sound like. So we will convey some of the, more easygoing way to think about GDPR, because it's very positive. It's like my message today is like you're doing this as marketers, giving really good news to whoever you have personal data about. It's really once you get through it and you do the necessary things and not the unnecessary things, it's just basically a good message, right? So that's what I enjoy most of it. And also we are very much entrepreneurs and small business owners. So we're also struggling with, other legislation and this as well. How do we make this like understandable and follow the, not the letter of the law, but the principles and, make this work, right?
What's interesting here is, this is our focus is very much on GDPR for sales and marketing, but you have a background in that as well, Daniel. That's where you started, right? Years and years ago.
Yeah, exactly. That's interesting as well. Maybe a bit extra close to my heart and understand the challenges or, everything you want to do. So yeah, definitely.
So sympathy for us.
Yeah, that's the first 20 years of my business life was in marketing. So I'm very much involved specifically here. Yeah.
So today's session, we're going to have a number of questions that we're going to go through, and they're ones that often come up. My frustration, I suspect, with GDPR has been companies stop doing things for no reason, and I won't say hide behind GDPR, but it's often used as an excuse. We do a lot of outreach and email marketing and newsletters and that sort of thing. And from my perspective, too many companies don't do enough of it and blame GDPR. So some of that we're going to get rid of today and things to watch out for. But it's going to be a conversation. So if there's any questions, just post them here as we go. Happy to take them. Before we start, and I know this is how you don't start a session, with a long text on a slide, but it's worth remembering and setting the context as to what GDPR is. And this is a very simple definition for it. And there's a word that I know you use quite a bit, but it basically is a framework for protection of personal data. And that word you use quite a lot as how you describe it. Rather than it being a law, GDPR, it's actually the framework for protection of data for individuals. A couple of key dates. It's nearly 10 years ago since it was adopted, and 2018 since it became mandatory. And the sentiment, I suppose, I want to get right here when we start. The sentiment is very much about giving individuals more control over their own data, empowering the individual rather than they being the object or the subject of others. So with that said, let's get into your background a little bit. When you started GDPR Hero, when you've seen the need, a little bit of history to it, and what it is you do.
Yeah, so we started off quite close to when GDPR was adapted as a legislation. So next year it will be 10 years ago. Wow. And we could see that it would be quite tricky law to work with, since the previous legislation had not been enforced at all, almost, in Sweden. So there was a big change coming, and businesses weren't really ready. So we thought it could be a smart way to see how to do it digitally without using a lot of man hours for legal consultation.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like, since we are both interested in the business side of things as well, it's like how this legislation is about personal data, and personal data is everywhere, right? So there's not personal data for one person in the organization. How do we educate the compliance officer? It's like everyone has to work a bit differently, perhaps. And how are we going to make this work? And this legislation, I mean, if you read every article and everything about it, it's quite the challenge, right? So how do we do this manageable and over a long time, so we don't have to redo this? Basically, how do we make this work? It's sounded like some great idea from the lawmaker, but it's like meeting reality. We did focus on the small. So the name GDPR Hero is because we thought this is gonna kill the energy in the room for everyone, and be a lot of let's not do that anymore. So we went through the legislation and saw that this is all possible. We just have to do it practically, make it useful.
What I think is interesting here, I've been following. I've known you guys for quite some time now, and we are going to talk about GDPR primarily today, and we're getting those questions now. But on a business level, it's just like any other business in that you've got this framework, which is a solution, it's a legislation. You've got companies out there that need to abide by it, and you're kind of in the middle trying to work out how do you translate this, the need versus how companies are going to do it, which is the exact same challenge that most SMEs have. You know, they've got a product or a service and they've got clients, and how do they get them to buy them? So you've evolved quite a bit over the years with this as well, based on how do you translate this into a business? How do you translate this into someone going to implement it? So how much have you worked with making it easier, I guess, for people to buy into GDPR and into you?
Yeah, so we had an interesting journey through all this, because we thought that the challenge would be actually the greatest with the smaller and medium-sized companies, because they don't have a lawyer at hand and they don't have the resources or time to outsource this. And they're probably going to find out 2018, right? Where the bigger companies are a few years ahead and they see that in 2 years we have to be ready, that kind of stuff. So we built it from the beginning, like the whole business, just to help small companies, right? That's where the challenge is. But we didn't get any traction, obviously, in 2016. So with the smaller ones, so we actually developed it for the smaller companies together with bigger companies, because they were very happy that we were actually trying to solve this and make this manageable, right? Because it turns out the challenge is much bigger there, even though they have almost endless resources. It's like a practical issue. How do we get everyone in a very big organization to suddenly, document it in a meaningful way? Because they're not as efficient. A small company is like more efficient, right? They can make their own decisions. Larger companies has to build the framework. So while working with the bigger companies, we succeeded in making it simple for the smaller ones, but also very good for the larger ones. So we now have like a even spread between small and large companies. And that also mirrors the legislation, because it's actually written to suit everyone in a way. It's very general privacy legislation, right? So that's the journey. And I think it turned out that it's not that big a challenge for the smaller companies once they get going, and especially the way we do it. So we do work more with larger companies now, like more man hours, obviously, and
But the structure we work with in the framework or our 10-step method is it also helps you get to know your business more in detail and get like an overview of what are we actually doing. There is so much going on in a business, but how we actually pinpointed what is important for us and where we need personal data. So it's not just like being compliant or do compliance work. It's also cover off other areas as well for that is efficient and an advantage and for smaller businesses.
Yeah, so I think that's good for us. But we actually challenge every part of GDPR, like what is this really useful for? Why do we have to do this? Not just that we have to do it. Like, because bigger companies say, yeah, we'll just follow the law, we can do it. And the smaller companies is like, what can we, what will we have the most benefit for? What looks good and all that, right? So
it's like a minimum viable product.
Yeah, right. And GDPR has so many things to cover, but they all tie together. Like, so we'll come to that later. But if you do one thing, you've done most of the other things, because it's all very much connected, right? So it's not 99 different articles. They follow this framework and this set of 5 principles, right? So I like how you started with saying that it's a framework like we do, and supervisory authorities, which is kind of the big bad wolf in the room, right? And the Swedish one, not the scariest one, but still, they actually said that it's one of the most common misconceptions about GDPR, that it's a set of don't do this, but it's rather like principles that you have to follow to do it in a safe way and a transparent way and all that. That's their view as well, right? Practical principles. Yeah.
So let's get straight into some of the meaty parts, and we'll start with the overall picture. What's your feeling on this? How compliant are companies today? Let's just focus on Sweden, given we're in that forum at the minute. How compliant are companies today? Scale of 1 to 10, what would you say?
Yeah, that's such a general question. But if we look at guidance from the supervisory authorities, and if we look at the letter of the law, it's difficult to imagine any organization not in breach of GDPR every day in, any way. There are so many different things, as we said, on the GDPR. But however, like the Swedish Supervisory Authority, you should think about it. It says you should think about it as principles, where you can then implement actions within your business, so you can be compliant quite thorough if you do small actions, but in the right place.
It's how you work, and it's like, so don't do anything that you didn't plan for, and tell people about, and be ready to answer questions. Like that's a very basic way to look at it, but in that way it's a much more positive picture, right? That's actually happening more and more. So it depends on how you look at it. It's like if we were just lawyers and not out there, we would say it's terrible and it doesn't work. But if we're like looking at what's actually happening, where there are some positives as well, it does make companies more efficient. They're getting rid of unuseful data, better relationships, and trust and all that, which sounds good and it is good, right? So that's
so it's probably more to do with deviousness. So you shouldn't be devious. You should be open, honest, best efforts. You're then on the road to compliance. So we may have gotten rid of a lot of the malfeasance, the bad practices. So that's the big step. But if you go to the letter of the law, my understanding from our discussions and looking around, the vast majority are not really to the letter of the law, but are to the principles. Is that good intent?
You can do more nuances of it. It's not just black and white. You can do like a risk-based approach where you put the right efforts in the right place, rather than do like an all-in solution, or like we do everything at once, because it's not a one-time action. It's something that you should build into your business process as well. So it's a bit of common sense as well.
Putting an MRP system in place. You can't cover the whole company day one. It takes time to put everything in place. So,
it's like marketing and sales. You can't figure out your sales funnel in one day.
If we link it to this, how important it is to be compliant. And I guess there's many aspects to this. So I'll let you start first, and how would you address this, the importance of being compliant?
If you look from a perspective like, will I get fined? Right. It's probably not that likely. Since here in Sweden, if we look at that perspective, the supervisory authority is mostly looking at more larger businesses and more severe breaches of the law. But if you look at goodwill perspective, customer experience, there are much more to tell there, like left carts at the web shop if you feel uncertain about the data processing, or if a form collects suspicious amount of personal data, or and
just the handling of it, like different, of course, from different businesses, but there's even if you don't get fined a lot, it's a long process and several years if you get like a complaint that you actually have to handle. You can't be too scared about it, but you also can't skip it, because then things are going to get bad, right? So it's kind of something that you should probably avoid if you can, with a reasonable effort, right? And it's a lot of bad will, and we see it more in business processes, because we
B2B.
B2B specifically, because it's another aspect of GDPR, but we're so interconnected, right? You don't want to have a challenge in your own organization and then get fined for just working with someone. So there is due diligence and some peer pressure. It's getting more important every day, definitely.
And if you work business to consumer, they get more aware of GDPR and data protection, and those issues. So someone will notice that you don't have a privacy policy or you don't have a cookie banner. Those visualized GDPR efforts.
Yeah, or they want to apply for a job, or
Exactly. What's interesting though is, I think if we ask most business owners this, they're doing it to avoid the fines, or to avoid potential of a fine. As you said, that the risk is quite low. Whereas what's interesting here is that actually, if you do it right, it might help your business.
Yeah.
At least it won't hinder it. So that's probably the bigger aspect for a small company than the fine potential.
Yeah, I think we're different in that way. We never stressed the fines, even when everyone was talking about it 2018, because that's not like a good business decision to make. It's more like certain companies will always live on that edge, but it's more like it's just important to us long term, and so it is. Yeah, but we see more pressure than we thought actually between companies and this general.
Yeah, and the B2B relation.
Yeah.
Okay, so it leads straight on to the main challenges. Before we get to some of the detailed questions, what's the main challenges you're finding people have with implementing and being compliant with GDPR?
One aspect is where to start. You get stuck with your head in the sand and stay there without getting a first direction of what should we do.
How do you overcome that?
Sorry?
How can they overcome that? Because it's a real issue, I can see.
Yeah. Definitely get a nulägesanalys in Swedish. Where are our risk areas? What should we start off with? And customer relations are important for all businesses. So that is probably an area that many should focus on.
Just depends on where the value is. It's really that practical. It's not like we're trying to avoid the law or get away with just business decisions here, because it's also very much tied to the reality. And so if personal data is important to your clients, it's important to you, you should probably start there, right? And then the actual challenge is, as I just said, also that you're gonna be involved with a lot of organizations. How do you map all this? Who's doing what, and where can we get in trouble?
Do you find different ones with different sectors? Because just as you're speaking there, the B2B one wasn't that much on my radar, but the healthcare sector, I would have thought, is a medical record sector. But maybe they're already sorted because they have got different challenges, and maybe this isn't an issue for them. Or is there some sectors that are more or less challenging?
Yeah, I think that comes back to it being a framework legislation. It's not just some word we say. It's actually, that's in legal terms, it is a framework legislation, right? So in areas like healthcare, there are already special legislation from before that was pretty strict, right? But that was for narrow areas documents for your patient journal and all that, which interestingly has made these businesses not take this too seriously, because they feel like they're used to it in one area, then therefore we shouldn't worry about the rest. But there are so many things that are not covered by that special legislation. So we see a lot of mistakes being made, and there are some quite obvious, people heard about 1177, this, where really sensitive stuff gets out because they really didn't think about these things. So that's not an area where we see that it's being worked at a lot, but it's obviously they should, right?
Yeah. I suppose complacency sets in when you think you're okay, but you actually mightn't be.
Yeah, and people trust them, so they don't ask questions, so they're not challenged, right? But it's an accident waiting to happen, I think. Yeah.
Just on the healthcare, I've just finished listening to a podcast. I know it's a 3-hour podcast about Epic Systems and how they handle. It's the biggest healthcare medical records provider in the world. I think they've 400 million patients on it. So if anyone's interested in healthcare and how handling records and building a software business around it, there's a fantastic podcast about them, Epic Systems.
Yeah, just one more thing, sorry, because it's very pertinent to what you said about sharing data. Because the main problem in the healthcare sector and also in the rest of the sectors is actually that you rely very much on your the software you're using. So
Yeah.
they take for granted that if it's a field in the software, I can use it, right? Because they all market themselves as GDPR compliant. And of
Right.
course, you can't be compliant because people can do whatever they want with you can't buy software and be GDPR compliant. It's how you use it, right? And these companies, they will put the field to fill in for anything that anyone asks for to sell, right? So it's very common, like when we get to questions about Google Analytics, you can measure anything, right? And it's possible. That doesn't mean that it's all legal, right? So yeah, sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, no, it's a good. It leads into the records thing. So basically, to think about what we collect rather than just filling in the boxes, because you might be inadvertently collecting information you shouldn't.
Yeah.
Okay. Is this why you talk about records quite a bit? Because you do, and your registry and all of this comes up a lot in our conversations.
Yeah.
Is that where a lot of the problems happen?
So the record will solve your problems. That will be your go-to manual where you can check, why do I need this information? Then I can motivate which personal data I collect. So that is like your summary of documentation on why you process personal data, and also some other parts as well, of course. But that it will be the basis for your GDPR compliance work, which will be used for answering questions both from the supervisory authority and from the individuals, because we cannot forget that they have right to get information. The transparency requirement on the GDPR is very broad. So what should I tell my customers or my employees? That you can find in the record. But also to keep track of your suppliers. Do we have sufficient contracts with our software suppliers? Does it cover data protection aspects? That is also something that can go into the record. And when should we delete information? To answer that question, you also need to have like a plan for deletion data, which should not be tied to like a specific person, but rather a category of individuals, such as potential customers, current customers, etc.
Yeah, so basically that's the easiest way to do GDPR in like once, and then have it useful for the other obligations, right? So it's basically you should have everything there. That's why it's an obligation. It's like bookkeeping. You can print out all kinds of reports for different decisions and answering different questions, right? So, but it's very essential because we see that, maybe the most visual lack of GDPR compliance is not having a privacy policy, right? But a privacy policy is just really like a short excerpt of the records you have. So what often happens is that you download a blueprint for a privacy policy, and then you wonder why it doesn't make sense. It's like, what can I use this information for? Maybe it's a competitor's privacy policy, and that's like having a restaurant and copying your another restaurant's menu. It doesn't make sense when you think about it. And you know, it's like writing a manual for a car you didn't build yet, and something like that. So that's a very clear process. So first, we find out who do we have personal data about, why do we have it, and then the why tells us if it's lawful. It's like, is it a contract, legal obligation, consent? So it's a very good place to start, but it's also like the thing that's
Core.
solves everything. Like yeah.
So it's literally you get out of jail card.
Yeah.
In a sense.
Yeah, it can be shown as a proof of your previous work, your active work, your planned actions as well. Even if something turns out bad, or you forgot something, you have something to rely on. So that is a good base.
So this is why that's your core product, I guess, that people can have that registry, they know exactly where to go, and it helps them to be compliant. Makes sense.
Exactly. And as Daniel said, the privacy policy is the one visualized effort you do that anyone can take part of. And in our software, you can just print out the privacy policy when you have documented your record. So that is like a value you get directly from doing the record, the data mapping.
Yeah, it's the same. If you share the data, you already know why you have it, so you can just print out instruction instead of like downloading a contract that you don't know how good it will suit your specific needs, right? So it's the practical GDPR is there, right? Yeah.
So if we get to the next piece, where's the problem areas mostly? Where do most not comply? What are you finding as the patterns? Or
I think we already mentioned it a little bit, but the unlawful sharing of personal data is a big issue, because if you use a free software, it is actually not free. You will sell personal data that you have collected in one way or another, and they will use it for their own purposes. So that is something that happens quite a lot, and you might not take responsibility for sharing the data. You are not informing the individuals concerned about this, so there are several breaches just in that part.
But you're still liable because you're the one that's done it or enabled it, I suppose.
Exactly.
Yeah, and GDPR, like we said, it's not like don't do this. It's how you should do it, right? So it's like GDPR was meant to facilitate sharing data in a respectful way, and so it's more of a okay. So they have your data. What can they do with it? And we can't say we don't know. It's like, yeah, we decided this or that, and either way is fine. You just have to approach it differently, right? Inform of it in a specific way. So it's not it's not the sharing that's unlawful, it's how you do it, right?
So if I pull this back to, let's say, sales and marketing. So let me take an example. Consumer stuff, we do this quite a bit. Analyzing the purchase data of, let's say, your e-commerce for the last year. If you don't anonymize the data, so let's say somebody just sends a consultant or somebody else their database, is that a non-compliance? Even though it's not been shared anywhere else, it's just been shared so they can do analysis. Or should that be anonymized before it's sent to a third party?
So there are two questions to answer there. You should always inform about personal data processing beforehand. So if you haven't told the individuals that will happen, then it will be unlawful to share it. But then if you have informed about it, you should always consider, do we need to share the information with identification possibility, or can we do it anonymously? And if the answer is yes, we can do it anonymously, then you should always anonymize the data before sharing, because that won't fit into the necessity requirement.
Yeah, exactly. So that's one of the principles, like data minimization, right? So need to know, like the spy novel and all that. So yeah, basically think it through, go through all the steps and inform about it as usually very much possible without going into like.
But I think there is an important thing to raise here as well, that many digital tools today don't inform their users about how they use personal data, like webinar streaming services. Will there be like analytics of the individuals joining or not, and how will that happen? Who will get the data, etc., etc. And that, if you have purchased some software, you might not even know what's happening in the background. So there's a lack of transparency between B2B as well.
Yeah,
and it's also very hard to turn it off.
Yeah, exactly. Setting-wise, it's quite tricky to be compliant as well. Yeah.
But this on StreamYard, at least, we don't have access to any of that. We don't even know who's in the room right now, but we will later. But we don't have access to when you signed on, how long you stayed. Any of that tracking is not on this platform. Usually it is, though. And usually it's not possible to turn it off.
Yeah, we're having constant troubles finding software for us because we have to be super compliant, right? And it's in the interest of our clients as well to find these companies. And it's really a hassle. And if we see at like supervisory authority, what they look at, it's like obviously very bad if you could turn it off, because usually it's just like a hidden tick box somewhere.
Yeah.
And we see that continuously, that they didn't even turn it off, so that's then definitely fine, right? And so on. So you should at the very least go in and sort what you can, and then see what they use the rest for, right? So yeah.
Now, I don't know if many know about Schrems or not. Anyone who's followed the GDPR story, we probably have heard of him at some point or other. And my perspective on him, and I want yours on this, is that if it wasn't for him, we probably wouldn't be wouldn't be enforcing a lot of the GDPR framework. He's kind of forced, or it feels like he's the only one that's suing the European Union to make sure that they enforce GDPR. Is that an accurate picture of his role right now, up until now?
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of built into the GDPR, so it could be more than him. It could grow this thing. It gets pretty popular, right? It's a very easy way to make a career now. I'm surprised that there aren't more, because it's part of the GDPR and the European model. You can go together as groups and fight these things. And the reason that you have to inform everyone about how you process personal data is because we don't rely on just the supervisory authorities. We rely on everyone to react to how they're treated, right? So that was, Max Schrems was famous for this specific case, like with the third country transfers. And the judges said there as well that it's super important that all supervisory authorities handle every single complaint, which is kind of like a background to this quote you have here, right? That it's not just the supervisory authority, it's actually the private individuals and these organizations. So it's kind of not unexpected, but yeah, you're right.
But who, it's a little bit, for me, who knows? Consumers don't necessarily know. So the supervisory authorities are the one that know the framework, and they know when someone's in breach or not. It's almost like a police service that will not arrest anybody until somebody complains.
Yeah.
That seems a bit crazy. That seems to be what's happening within the GDPR framework. That if you complain, and he's being the one saying, guys, there's a framework here, we need to implement it. We need to enforce it. Now, more recently, there's a bit of noise about this, that actually it's getting worse, not better. So he seems to be of that view. Do you think it is getting worse or better in terms of what's going to happen next with GDPR?
I mean, it's like it's slowing things down. This cross-border that is talking about here, right? So that's where you get a complaint in one country, but it affects citizens in other EU countries. Yeah. What happens usually, and what we see in Sweden, is that Swedish authorities are kind of soft here. So they say, no, that was fine, and the company that was didn't get fined was happy. But then 2 weeks later, the other countries that were involved get involved and say, no, this is not the harmonized way. This would not work in Germany, where we are, where the data socket is. So it brings it up again. So it becomes a really long process, right? So if you get fined, it's really bad news. But of course, if you want the authorities to not have time for you, it's good news, right? So it's kind of like it's a mess. Basically.
But I suppose for the small company, we can probably say this is okay, not to worry too much about it. There's going to be a lot of noise in the background, and probably more. But for the majority of the SMEs, you're operating locally, this won't be the big issue. Yeah. This one I'm hearing more about, I know we talked about during the week, that there's changes coming, it being watered down, or what's your take on this? Or is this just more rumors and not reality?
There has been quite a lot of discussions about GDPR being a hindrance and being a roadblock because it has a lot of different rules. But if you see it as a framework, you can set up a structure and a way to work forward to actually respect this human right as it is based upon. So it hasn't been any decision on easing up the rules or changing GDPR in its core. So no changes announced, but there has been discussions in certain areas to put more focus on more risk-based legislation or provisions, to actually targeting the data processing that is more of high risk to individuals. But what I want to raise here is that GDPR is a basis not only for data protection of personal data, but there is coming more and more legislations in this field. Digital Service Act, AI Act, Marketing Act, etc. And those are based on GDPR. So we probably won't see that much changes in GDPR, since it's like a core legislation of the EU, where you need to have GDPR in place in order to actually move on to further comply with additional laws.
So we should wait and see. It's not going away anytime soon. The principles are the principles, and they are in place.
I think that two things to this. So one is that, you know, as we started with it seems impossible, and of course we can't keep doing this, because, you know, if you just read the law, it's terrible. I mean, a small company could never do this, and it does apply to them, right? So there's a lot of talk about small and medium businesses, and but this kind of goes away when you think the way the authorities do about the principles, right? So there's an interpretation to every rule, right? And a lot of derogations, and also like special regulation can come to in effect and not water it down, but specify. So this is how we actually solve this. The GDPR recognizes as an area to protect, everyone's protected personal data. So if you do this, then it's okay. So the framework works in like, basically, don't use data that you don't have a use for, don't share it without a contract. You know, that's very basic, that won't go away. It's not like we're going to take away 5 random provisions of GDPR every year, and that's how it's watering down. It's more like which areas are specifically problematic, and how can we pragmatically, you know, keep it safe but more easy to use, right? Yeah. So
it's better, instead of it being locked away in an ivory tower, let's get something that's workable in place, and get everyone to a better place.
And there's so many myths also. So
must-haves. I guess we've kind of covered a lot of that off, but it seems like the record, having this central record for how you process data, seems to be the core.
Yeah.
To this.
And the information to the individuals, the privacy policy that's most commonly known as, but also to make informed decisions, look through software settings before activating. That is quite an important task, to not risk exposure yourself unnecessary.
Yeah, and often communications. I'm
actually going to go through some of the quick fire stuff, because I realize in terms of time, there's a few specifics relating to sales and marketing that it's quite be good to pull up. We get this a lot about emailing clients.
Yeah.
And people saying, well, I didn't get the permission to email. So I know there's a number of levels to this, but maybe you cover off as many as we can here about emailing clients.
Yeah, so where you should start from is to describe what is the purpose for you emailing, because that sets the frame for what you can do. So depending on how you set up your subscription for email, what the content is, what is your purpose with sending the emails, the answer might depend a little bit.
Okay.
But if you, for example, send product updates, informational emails, that's always okay to clients, to inform them about something they have purchased from you.
Even if they've unsubscribed, even if they've clicked the box unsubscribe, you can still do that, right?
That will be tied together with like the product you have sold.
Right.
If it's important information about how it works, product updates.
Yeah, so to put it on a scale, I mean, obviously safety instructions you can always send, right, to make sense, and you know, updates that you're not like implied in the contract, like that you should always be able to send. So, but then it leans towards, you know, now there's a new product that's more like direct marketing. So that, and we get into that, right? So it's very much how you motivate, why you send it.
Right. So let's go into that one then. So we've got clients, they haven't opted out. Can we email them about new products?
So B2B, you can send those emails like direct marketing based on legitimate interest. But of course, they always have the ability or the option to reject, to opt out. That's important to give them that
And
alternative.
how about consumers? So consumers have bought a product and we have other products that they might like. Can we email them?
Yeah, for B2C, you can send direct marketing emails that are for similar products or related services. So there needs to be a connection from what you sold or what your previous relationship was. So it can't be something totally irrelevant from what you previously talked about.
And I mean, definitely for Sweden, then there are some differences from country to country, because like here, GDPR is a framework and it can be more strict applications in some countries. So you should look for that, of course. But just to follow up on your you say subscription, that's very important to us from a practical perspective. So we try to only create subscriptions that are specific, not only because it's good GDPR-wise, know what you have it for, but generally you want like one subscription for the newsletter, one for the webinars, and one for like product updates, because then if they unsubscribe for one of them, which is different from another, you can still do the others. And that's not like an abuse. That's actually kind of usually how people react. It's not necessarily true that they don't want to be able to go to the webinars just because they're tired of your newsletter or whatever. So that's very important to think about your processes that way. It's per purpose.
Exactly. This is what is the one piece of GDPR that I like, because it actually makes you a better marketeer.
Yeah.
It forces you to say, okay, what am I doing? Why am I doing it? And that's good marketing, actually, rather than it being about the rules and the laws. The difficulty is implementing that without it becoming, I've got 20 boxes I need people to tick before I can continue. So I guess that's the balancing act.
Yeah, and one thing we learned along the way was when we started doing webinars, we sent them out, invitation. Here is the next webinar. Sign up if you want to join that. And then for the next one, sign up. And then, there's a lot of emails going up, sign up for the next one. So we decided to do a webinar series. So you sign up for the webinar series and you join for as long as you want. But if you don't want to get the invitations or links to the next one, you just unsubscribe. And that's smoother for us. It saved a lot of time and a lot of emails.
Yeah, it's almost obnoxious sometimes when you ask for too much consent, or
exactly.
You really have to think, like you said, what's the purpose here? What am I even doing? So think first of what you want to achieve, and then at the law, not the other way around. Like I have to have consent, whatever. Doesn't make sense. Yeah.
I'll come back to this. We actually have an interesting question, but we'll go through a few of these quick fire ones, and then we'll come back to a question or two that we have here coming up relates to consent. Now, this one I come across. So, under what circumstances, I suppose I'll reword this question. Under what circumstances, maybe can I or can I not add people to my newsletter? So if somebody signs up for an event, can I then send them a newsletter? Is that only for B2B I can do this? Is legitimate interest enough for me to do this? How do we handle the newsletter thing without, let's say, do I have to have consent for the newsletter is probably the question.
Yeah, so that is a common myth under GDPR that you always need consent.
Specific, yeah.
In this case, if you get in touch with someone in other channels rather than the newsletter, and you can say that, you've shown interest in my services or what I offer, I would like to send you the newsletter because I think it will be relevant for you, then that can be a legitimate interest as a base for sending that B2B wise. In Sweden, it's different for business to consumer because you need a previous relationship for sending that out.
Yeah, but it could have been like they already did something with you. Doesn't have to be monetary. I mean, kind of, but it's more like, you don't have to focus too much on the name newsletter, right? It's the same as the last question. Yeah, basically, it's what I'm trying to say.
But you have to treat consumers different than businesses here.
Yeah.
Do consumers have to specifically opt in?
Unless they had a similar product or service bought from you before, in Sweden. And it differs a bit on how you communicate on these things, but yeah.
So legitimate interest can cover consumer as well as business, provided we're reasonable and it's, I suppose, being reasonable about it.
Yeah.
Okay. GA4, we've had a lot of conversation about this a couple of years ago at least. It's gone quiet, but I'm not sure if it really has. So can we or should we, or is it okay to use Google Analytics or not?
So tracking overall, you need to look at the provider. So GA4, for example, you need to know where the data is stored, and Google is certified under the data privacy framework, which means that as long as they are certified, it's allowed to send the data to that provider since they are US based. But you still need to comply with the principles like the data minimization. You don't collect more data than you need to. And that comes back to that you need to know what you actually want to do with the tracking. Do you know which data is necessary for your specific website tracking? Then you can minimize the data collected.
But is it legal again? Because it went from basically legal to not legal. Is it back legal now again?
So that's a funny story actually, because there were 4 companies in Sweden that got where the authorities checked them out and said that this is not allowed. And the same day that they made the decision, they wrote on their webpage, big news, companies can no longer use Google Analytics, right? And I took a screenshot because I thought this was like, they've never done anything like this, like generally saying that something was not okay. And the day after, they changed the title to these 4 companies may not use Google Analytics 4. So they say specifically, we can't exclude anyone else because, it's possible, obviously. GDPR doesn't forbid anything. They're very, specific about that. So you have to like ask your lawyer kind of thing, right? So that's,
But what has been up on the agenda for like tracking is the consent collection for cookies. And that has been quite a lot of breaches on the valid consent collection. So that could be one way where you can use GA4 because you have the right settings, you have followed the principles, but you don't collect cookies lawfully with a consent.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of non-compliance on that one.
Yep.
You know what? I'm going to jump to the question in here because it's quite an interesting one, and I'll just highlight that on the screen here. So, having a lot of online events, I found this one stretch to get consent or approval. That if you participate, it will be recorded and possibly published.
Yeah.
I guess what you're really asking here is, do we need to ask everybody in the room, yes, it's okay? Or in this instance, nobody is in the room. So nobody can see who's in the room except us. Therefore, is that okay to record? Or what is the boundaries here?
So the first thing you should do is not call it consent, right? Because that's not possible, because then it has to be informed and specific and beforehand. So this might be possible based on legitimate interest, which is another possibility. And then it comes down to like having this discussion. So did we minimize the risk? Did we do everything we could to like have it useful without unnecessary exposure? Do we know that people generally are not, have a secret identity or some other issue with this? Like, so you make a generalized
assessment.
Yeah, assessment, right? It's called a legitimate interest assessment. So depending on how well you think this through and minimize the risk, it's usually possible, right? But
so if I cut it here and say, if we were doing let's say a call here or a Zoom, everybody's face and name was on the screen, and we recorded it and then showed it in different places, we probably should have asked people, can we do that? Whereas,
there's still like a information requirement beforehand, before you start the processing. So anyone have the possibility to object, and to do it practically, you should then be able to present an option where you can join in but don't have to be recorded. That's an easy way to do it, to make it legal. Yeah.
Question there for you. Do we have to do that? Or could we say the condition of attending this event is that you're on the screen, you can leave anytime you want, it's going to be recorded as of now? That's also okay? Or not?
You can't phrase it like that. You can say, we're going to do this, and then you have the right to object. And then you can, in your head, think that their objection will likely not go through because I make the decision, right? And then you take your chances with the authorities, right? So that's basically, so you should never say this is part of the contract, because that's another lawful basis, not to get too legal here, but you can never say that that's necessary, right? Because there's for every legal basis, it has to be necessary for a legal obligation or a contract or whatever. So you have to first identify that this is in fact something where you have to. Yeah,
but it basically you could say to someone, let's say if it's a Zoom, you can just turn off your camera if you don't want to be seen, and you can just remove your name, and you have 1 minute to do that, and then we're live. That then is okay, I suspect, right?
Yeah.
Whereas,
yeah, exactly that. So if it's really easy to avoid, you're unlikely to get your will with the authorities, because they will say like, yeah, you had a big interest, it's valid, but it was so easy to avoid that we're going to fine you. Like, this is obviously unnecessary, right? Sorry. Yeah.
Good. Because it's a very practical thing, and we can see if there's anything else to share, any questions come up. But my conclusion here is the same as I had before with you, that it's not necessarily something to be afraid of. And if you're reasonable and you approach it, the approach seems to me to be the key. So even the question there about the online or not, how you approach the problem or the question, it gives you the right answer. And it's a little bit of a lens you look through when you're doing GDPR that others don't.
Yeah, I think we had a lot of actually very good examples here just by accident, right? Like we noticed that if you call it you have to attend the webinar, make it sound like a contract, that's not okay. But it is okay if you don't say that. You do the exact same thing, but you name it what it is. It's like a legitimate interest, where you like open up the possibility to object, and then maybe you say the objection is not enough. So like it's more of a, have to keep track of what you're doing and why, call it the right thing so that you can handle this, under GDPR. So if you do say that it's based on consent, then you limit yourself. So just that knowledge is very important, right? So it's like
the starting point is an important piece, whereas the sales and marketing perspective would be, okay, either we're doing this or don't attend. Whereas if you approach the other way, you can actually be compliant without it being an issue.
Yeah, I also want to add that this is not like a way to get around the legislation. The legislation is very well thought out. So when I say that you can still tape this on video, and as long as you make it possible to object, that's part of the legislation. Like they say it is possible only because you can object and that there's a due process there, right? So it's already inside the legislation. It's like that you have to do your GDPR work before, so you don't say you can't object or like this is how it is. It's a big difference. Oh, sorry.
And I just wanted to answer like the question of how much can we stretch a consent, and that is really narrow. There are a lot of audits on data processing where they have focused on consent because individuals get deceptive of their choice through different settings and different phrasings, etc. So for consent to be valid, it must be informed, freely given, revocable, and specified. So there is not much room there to stretch. So better to look at the other options under GDPR.
Yeah, exactly. The starting point. You can still achieve the same thing without actually looking at it like that.
Yeah, exactly.
This is the main thing. Every time we have our conversations, I leave with that perspective rather than the normal sales and marketing perspective, which is exactly what I was saying. Okay, how do I get away with this? Whereas if you go the other way, there's nothing to get away with.
No.
And it can still work. Listen, thank you for your time. I realize we're an hour. It's gone. It's ridiculous how quickly it goes. GDPR Hero, the team are there. Anyone wants to take contact with you, take contact directly with Daniel and Julianne. The alternative is you just reply to one of the mails we got and we'll actually forward you the details. They are, as you can see, quite personable lawyers and understand the subject very well. And the perspective is the key. It's actually really important. So thank you for joining us today. It's been really useful. Hopefully it's been helpful for our viewers as well today. Next week we have an alumni on the 22nd, and there we're going to be talking a lot about Amazon and our experience there. I would say mostly unpleasant. As a consumer, I love it. As a retailer, I hate it. Then we have the next Swedish E-commerce Association session next month, and they were focusing on how to stand out from the crowd. It's often an SME challenge and problem, and then we have a briefing session on the 12th of June. So there's a number of different ones. If anyone's interested in attending those, you'll probably get an email about it anyway, because it is very much related to all things sales and marketing that we do. Anything else to share, or are we good for today? Any questions there, Kajsa? I know we're an hour in.
You're on mute.
Det räckte inte med att jag bara satte igång videon. Jättespännande seminarium och framförallt med mycket möjligheter. Just det där att man behöver liksom inte börja och tänka jag kommer göra någonting fel. Jätteintressant. Hoppas att vi får tillbaka er vid ett annat tillfälle. Det känns som att vi har liksom bara skrapat på ytan och att det finns mycket mer att säga om detta. Ni har fått Daniels och Julians kontaktuppgifter om ni har specifika frågor till dem. Edvard har pratat om vad som händer den närmaste tiden och om nästa tillfälle när vi i The Swedish E-commerce Association träffas. Så tack allihopa som har varit här och tack för frågor och hoppas att vi ses snart igen.
Thanks very much and see
Thank you so much.
Bye now.
Take care, everyone.